The city lived without him. People passed by as if he were nothing more than a shadow stretched across the pavement, a ghost woven into the asphalt. In the cafe windows, strangers' smiles reflected back at him. In the sleek glass of luxury cars, he caught glimpses of faces full of purpose and significance. The world moved like a river, and he remained a motionless stone at its bottom. Julian walked the streets without knowing where he was going. He had long stopped asking himself that question. There was nowhere to hurry, no one to wait for. Once, he had a life, a job, an apartment, dreams. Now there was only the gray rain, the heavy air of the metropolis, and pockets that jingled with emptiness. His world was built from rejections. "Thank you, but we've chosen another candidate." "Sorry, we need someone with more experience. Leave your resume, we'll call you." But no one ever called. Lately he had the feeling that he was dissolving, as if his body was just a shell, and inside there was nothing left. Blurred outlines, transparent hands, a voice losing its weight in the air. Only the shadow remained. He was crossing Fifth Avenue when he felt the familiar growl from within. His stomach demanded food. A few hours ago, he had finished the last pack of instant noodles, bought with the spare change he had dug out of an old coat pocket. "All right," he thought. "I'll find a cafe where I can sit and warm up without drawing attention." A city that never looks back. The metropolis pulsed with its own rhythm. Julian watched people rush past him, some heading to meetings, some staring nervously at their phones, some laughing while leaning toward a friend. Their conversations blended into white noise, an endless stream of words that never touched him. He passed a luxury boutique's window display. Inside, a woman in an elegant coat was examining a handbag, her fingers absently brushing the price tag. The number on that tiny label was more than he could earn in a month, if he even had a job. Well, he smirked to himself, the world belongs to those with money. But deep down, he knew he hadn't always thought this way. Once, he had believed in dreams, in opportunities, in the idea that if you work hard, you'll succeed. Now he understood that sometimes life doesn't leave you a choice. Sometimes, it simply erases you from the system, like an error in the code. Julian turned into an alley where the cheaper cafes were. But then, something caught his attention on the other side of the street. A woman carrying more than just bags. She walked slowly, heavily, as if she weren't just carrying shopping bags but something far greater. Julian instinctively slowed his pace. Her face was hidden beneath a hood, but her movements, strained and tense, betrayed her exhaustion. One of the bags slipped from her shoulder, falling onto the wet pavement. She stopped, trying to pick it up, but her strength was gone. The street was full of people. They glanced at her briefly, then kept walking. Julian hesitated. It wasn't his problem. He had enough of his own. But something deep inside him stirred. A buried impulse. A forgotten trace of humanity. He stepped forward. "Let me help you." The woman slowly lifted her head. At that moment, the streetlight cast a glow over her face, and Julian froze. There was something familiar about her. But before he could place where he had seen her before, she smiled. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how much I needed that." Julian picked up the bag, his gaze locked onto her eyes. They were deep, like an ocean, and in them, he saw more than just gratitude. There was something else, something he couldn't yet decipher. Julian was used to silence. It was his companion, his inseparable shadow. But now, standing next to this woman, he felt something strange for the first time in a long while, an unfamiliar sense of unease. She looked at him closely, too closely for a random passerby. Her gaze was the kind people had when they were used to the glare of spotlights and the lenses of 1,000 cameras. It was the look of someone the world recognized, yet in this moment, the world had forgotten her. "Heavy, isn't it?" he asked quietly, picking up the fallen bag. The woman smiled, but her smile was weary. "More than it seems," she said. Julian didn't ask any questions. They walked in silence, side by side, with him carrying half of her burden. The air around them felt tense, like the sky before a storm. When the world doesn't recognize you, Out of the corner of his eye, he observed her. She was wrapped in a simple coat, her hair tucked beneath a hood, and her movements carried a carefulness that bordered on anxiety. And yet, there was something regal about her, even as she tried to disappear. Who is she? He wondered. And immediately, he answered himself. What does it matter? He was just a stranger who had helped pick up a bag. In a few minutes, they would part ways. Her life would continue at its usual pace, and he would return to his silent existence. But something inside him whispered that this wasn't just a simple encounter. One question that changes everything. Do you always help strangers like this? She suddenly asked when they stopped at the corner of the street. Julian smirked. I just felt like you really needed it. She nodded, watching him thoughtfully. What's your name? He was surprised. People usually didn't ask his name. He was just part of the background, another faceless figure blending into the city. Julian, he replied reluctantly. And you? She hesitated for a second, as if deciding whether to answer. Oh, that doesn't matter, she said with a small smile. Her voice was familiar. Something inside Julian clicked, like a puzzle piece sliding into place. But before he could ask anything else, she extended her hand. Thank you, Julian. It's been a long time since someone helped me just because. He shook her hand, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the whole world had stopped, as if this meeting was something more than just a coincidence. The thin line between light and shadow. And then she was gone. Julian stood there, watching until her figure disappeared into the crowd. Why hadn't he asked for her name? Why hadn't he questioned her more? There was something familiar about her. Or maybe he was just exhausted. A seed of doubt. He walked down the street, but the thought of her wouldn't leave his mind. She wasn't the type of person who carried heavy bags alone. She wasn't the type who hid beneath a hood. And most of all, she wasn't the type who looked at him, a complete stranger, with such focused attention. Julian tried to push the thought away, but fate had already made its move, and this evening had just become the starting point. Tried to push her out of his thoughts, but it was harder than he expected. Her voice, her smile, that strange, penetrating gaze that seemed to reach deep inside him. It was all stuck in his memory, like a grain of sand in an hourglass, preventing time from flowing freely. He even caught himself scanning the faces of passers-by, searching for her silhouette among the crowd. It gnawed at him, an uneasy feeling that their encounter wasn't meant to simply fade away, becoming just another fleeting episode in his life. But the city moved on, and she had disappeared into its rhythm. Julian returned to his usual routines. From the cheap cafe where he could get a coffee for a couple of dollars to the library, where he spent hours reading newspapers left behind on the tables. Everything was as it always was. Almost. Faces that can't be forgotten. He usually didn't linger in cafes longer than necessary, but that day, he decided to stay a little longer. To hide from the rain, warm his hands against a hot cup, and simply allow himself a moment of silence. And that was when he saw her. She was on the screen of an old television hanging in the corner. The news anchor was saying something important, but Julian didn't hear the words. Because she was right there. Oprah Winfrey. Julian felt something drop inside him, as if he had stepped into empty space. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her gaze, the way she spoke, the quiet yet undeniable aura of strength she carried. He had helped Oprah Winfrey. But what was she doing there? Alone, without cameras, without security, without the usual halo of fame. And why had she chosen him? An answer that won't let go. Julian tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence. The world was vast, yet sometimes stars aligned in the most unexpected places. But if it was only a coincidence, then why couldn't he shake the feeling that it meant something more? His eyes remained fixed on the screen. Oprah was speaking about something important, projects, helping people, something that, on the surface, had nothing to do with him. But at the very end of her speech, something strange happened. She suddenly smiled and looked straight into the camera, just like she had looked at him that night. Julian shuddered, when silence speaks louder than words. He left the cafe, His insides twisted in a knot, though he couldn't explain why. Just a coincidence? A simple chance encounter? He tried to convince himself, but his intuition whispered otherwise. That night, he lay awake, replaying their brief conversation in his mind. What's your name? Does it matter? And now he realized, at that moment, it had mattered. It had mattered to her. But why? A call that turns reality. Upside-down morning arrived, gray and rainy, much like the rest of his life. Julian got up, poured himself a cup of cheap instant coffee, and was about to head outside when his phone rang. It was strange. His phone almost never rang, except for spam calls or wrong numbers. He glanced at the screen. An unknown number. His intuition stirred once more. Julian pressed the button and raised the phone to his ear. Hello? The response was brief. A new chapter awaits you, tomorrow at noon, 5th and Brooklyn. And then, silence. The number was unlisted. No name, no digits, no clues. Julian stared at the darkened screen of his phone, torn between two feelings. A cold sense of foreboding and a burning curiosity. A new chapter awaits you. The caller's words echoed in his mind. Someone was playing a game with him, a game whose rules he didn't know. Tomorrow at noon, 5th and Brooklyn. He could choose not to go. He could forget the call and go on living the way he always had, on the sidelines, in the shadows, nameless, without a past, without a future. But what did he have to lose? A road into the unknown. The morning was just as gray as all the others. The city moved on, indifferent to him. Yet today Julian felt different, as if he was walking towards something important. Each step on the pavement echoed in his temples. He didn't know what awaited him around the corner, but deep down, he understood. This day would change everything. 5th and Brooklyn. An ordinary intersection, one of thousands across the city. People hurried about their business, taxis honked, and the air smelled of morning coffee and damp asphalt. Nothing unusual. But his eyes immediately locked onto a black car parked by the curb. The driver's window lowered, revealing a man in a sharp suit who gave him a slight nod. Get in. Julian didn't move. Who are you? The man didn't blink. You know who's waiting for you. A warmth spread in Julian's chest. Oprah. So this wasn't just a coincidence. She had been looking for him. The meeting. The car drove in silence. The driver didn't ask questions, and Julian didn't try to speak. He watched the city through the window, trying to guess where they were headed. Soon, the bustling streets gave way to towering mansions behind wrought iron gates. In the distance, a grand house with columns loomed. The car came to a halt in front of massive gates. Go on, the driver said, stepping out and motioning for Julian to follow. Julian felt out of place. He was a man of the streets, and everything here breathed wealth, power, and influence. But he kept walking. It was too late to turn back now. The wide doors opened, and there she was. No hood, no heavy bags, dressed in an elegant pantsuit, a slight smile on her lips, but her gaze was the same, piercing, unsettling. I knew you'd come, Julian, Oprah said. Come in. We have much to discuss. The hidden meaning of the meeting. They sat in a spacious living room. Julian felt uncomfortable. Everything was too soft, too expensive, too full of unspoken meanings. You probably want to know why I'm here, he said, breaking the silence. Oprah tilted her head slightly. I already know. The question is, do you want to know yourself? He frowned. What do you mean? That there are no coincidences, she replied. You think you just helped a stranger with heavy bags. But it goes much deeper than that. Julian had expected anything. That she would offer him money, ask for a favor, say, thank you, and let him return to his old life. But her next words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Julian, we've met before. Shattered memories. The world around him shrank. What? He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Yes, Oprah said gently. Oh, but you don't remember. Julian clenched his jaw. Memory. For some reason, her words stirred something deep inside his mind. Something old, forgotten. Fragments of images, echoes of voices. Like a long sealed room in his brain had suddenly started to open. But he couldn't grasp it. He couldn't understand. Oprah watched his reaction closely. "It's okay," she said. "Just listen." Julian took a shaky breath. "I'm listening." And Oprah began to speak. Julian stared at Oprah, a storm raging inside him. She claimed they had met before. But when? Where? He desperately tried to grasp the fleeting images, but his memory was as empty as an abandoned attic, locked behind a rusted door. "I don't understand," he finally exhaled. Oprah nodded, as if she had expected this. "It's normal. Sometimes the mind hides the truth from us so we can survive." His heart sank. "Are you saying I forgot something?" "You didn't just forget, Julian. You made yourself forget." Her voice, deep and calm, rang like a bell in the night. A sharp pain pricked his chest. There was something. Something he had pushed so far away that now it felt like it belonged to someone else. "Remember," Oprah said. Old wounds reopened. A sudden headache struck, as if 1,000 needles had pierced his mind. Images. They began surfacing, like air bubbles rising from the depths of the ocean. Scorching sun. A road. A dark car. A woman in the back seat. And screams. Someone grabbed him, shoved him to the ground. Black boots. Too polished. Too perfect. You never saw her, understand? You never saw her. Pain. Darkness swallowed his vision, and then nothing. The hidden truth. Julian shot up, clutching his head. "No." His voice was hoarse, as if he had run a marathon. This can't be real." He looked at Oprah, and in her eyes there was no fear, no doubt. "You remembered," she said. Julian exhaled sharply. It had been a long time ago. He used to work as a driver, a modest job, little money, but he was content. One day, he was assigned to pick up an important client, but when he saw who he was supposed to pick up, everything changed. It was her, Oprah Winfrey. But for some reason, she was terrified. She was being held against her will. They didn't know he had seen. But he had seen, and he had paid the price. Why was he left alive? Julian suddenly realized. They hadn't just beaten him and left him for dead. They erased his past. They took everything, his job, his money, his name. They left him with nothing but fear and a void in his memory. But why? He looked at Oprah again. "Who did this?" he asked. She took a slow breath, like someone about to open Pandora's box. "People who have too much to lose if the truth comes out." Anger flared inside Julian. "And why do you need me now?" Oprah smiled. "Because now you know." A new chapter. Julian didn't know what came next, but he knew one thing. He was not who he thought he was. The past had returned, and now he was ready to face it. Oprah extended her hand. "Are you ready to open a new chapter in your life?" He looked at her confidence, at her strength, and finally, he smiled. "Yes."